Okay, so we're gonna start with journalism. We're gonna start with B, so we got 5 images.
Sonoma County Fair, 1 of 4. Looking down the midway of the Sonoma County Fair, the warm August nights brought 125,802 county residents in 2019 out to enjoy the Ferris wheels, twirly rides, and food. 2 of 4. However, how long can simplicity and entertainment provided by merry-go-rounds compete with iPhone pictures, texting, and modern entertainment? 3 of 4. Paid attendance has steadily dropped from a 2013 peak of 199,826. The 2017 fire and recent mass shooting at venues like the Gilroy Garlic Festival all contribute. 4 of 4. When will attendance drop so low that the music stops? Ferris wheels grind to a halt, and summer evenings of simple innocence are an American memory.
Great. Could you go back to the first one, please?
Can
So-
we ask you to step to the side because you're,
I will be moving around.
oh, okay. Okay,
Hopefully
don't trip
that-
over the cord.
Hopefully that will work.
Yeah.
So in journalism, as you know, we're trying to tell a story, generally a newsworthy story, or else a human interest story. And that story takes precedence over the pictorial content of the image. But I think the pictorial content here is very nice. We've got, the maker chose to put it into black and white, which I think adds a little bit to the story. I'm not sure what that is there. But here we start out with an overview. If you go to the next one. And we continue the story about the competition with modern technology, and we show that a very traditional merry-go-round with a person using the iPhone. You might want to lighten that up a little bit so people can see it a little bit clearer, but otherwise it's fine. And then the next one. This is a very nice photograph, but I don't think it moves the story along quite as well as the next one. If you go to the next one, please. Where we see the Ferris wheel with several empty spaces. If the previous one had more like empty chairs or something, that would help move the story along. But you know, I'm not sure how valuable the one before this is compared to this one. Okay, can we go to the next?
The 2018 Kilauea Fisher number 8 flow reaches the ocean, traveling 15 miles to the Isaac Hale Park, lava often flowing a quarter mile wide and 40 miles per hour.
So this is a pretty traditional, I would say, photograph to tell a story about this particular event. It's a good title. It tells exactly where it is and tells something, helps you understand what you're seeing in the picture because you don't really know the scale just by looking at it. And 2018 is fine because this was an event that lasted for a very long period of time. We've got, pictorially a nice diagonal element here. We clearly see it entering the ocean and causing this billowing steam, so it tells a nice story. You might consider like cropping it there and just to eliminate that cloud and bring the focus a little bit more on the main story here. Next, please.
The Fool's Parade, held near April 1st in Occidental, California, is an excuse to get dressed up and go a little crazy. The whole town turns out, many in costume, to join the floats and bands in the parade.
Again, a good title. You can clearly see there's a good relationship between what's in the title and what's in the photograph, which makes it a strong journalism story. You probably don't. I mean, it'd be nice to have the year there, but probably in the newspaper it'd be clear it was the current year. To me, the strongest part of this image is certainly this person here, and then based on the title, I want to include the float. So you might consider doing something like cropping it in a little bit there and try to bring the focus onto here. I might have suggested cropping here too, because that person's not so strong, but then you cut off his arm and you don't know why, so maybe you should leave that person in. Okay, next.
Journalism, A, one image.
Love, Destiny, Mania, 1 of 4. Visitation at the ancient capital city of, I should have tried that before, has skyrocketed among the youth due to the popular 2018 soap opera set in the 17th century Thailand.
Okay, next.
That's it.
Oh,
No,
it's 1 of 4.
there's 4.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Love, Destiny, Mania, 2 of 4. The grounds at sunset find young ladies dressed in chat Thai, traditional Thai garb, emulating their favorite characters in pursuit of the perfect selfie. Love, Destiny, Mania, 3 of 4. Enthusiasm for the series and getting the perfect shot is shared by young men as well, who strut the ruins in historically accurate costumes from head to curled toes. Love, Destiny, Mania, 4 of 4. However, not all have caught the fever, and some seem to make a statement against the fad with modern dress at the historical site, also to be shared on social media.
Okay, back to the first one. I think, very much like the earlier sequence, this one starts out with an opening shot that kind of sets the stage, which I think is a strong way to start a story if you're going to do a sequence, so you can see the structure, historic structure, and see what's going on in the foreground. And then as you go to the next one, you zoom in to look at a specific person and tell the story in more detail. And I think this is, very nice portrait with good lighting. So I think it tells the story strongly, a strong story about how the young ladies interact with this. And then we go to the next one. And we point out that it's men as well as women. I think that makes the continues the story. A good picture of that one. And then finally, the last version presents a contrast between the people who are doing the more traditional and someone in very modern. This is a storytelling choice you make. You could focus on one point, and I think you could have used the first 3 to make that point very strongly. And if you didn't have the last image, it still would have been a very, very strong story. But if you really want to show the contrast, I think adding the last one adds a little bit more. Okay, thanks.
Okay, on to masters, 3 images.
Getting Inked, Tattoos and Blues event, Santa Rosa, California, February 29th, 2020.
So good title, it tells exactly where we are and when it happened. So who, what, when, where, why is kind of the mantra of journalism, and you've covered most of those topics here. The title of Getting Inked focuses very closely with what's going on in the image where we see that action. And you tell the fact that you're using a really strong side view with strong high contrast lighting, I think makes a powerful story. And he's looking down at the action. You see the hands coming in doing that. I think that works very, very well to make the story. The background out of focus is very good. I might like a little bit more focus here since it's about getting inked. I not only want the person, but I want the action going on. That's kind of a minor point. I think just having a strong portrait is telling a good story. Next.
Jacob sits calmly as a tattoo artist works on his back during the 29th annual Santa Rosa Tattoo Festival, which was held at the Flamingo Hotel. Artisans came from around the country to the event.
So unlike the previous one, here we had the main subject looking directly into the camera. It gives a totally different feel. It makes a strong connection between the photographer and therefore with the audience and the activity going on. I think that in this case, because the title is Jacob Sits Calmly, the fact that the tattoo artist is a little bit out of focus helps bring the story strongly into here, where the main point of the story is, but there's enough detail over here that you know what's going on. You could consider maybe just darkening this area a little bit, which is dodging and burning is allowed in journalism to keep the focus on here. Okay, thanks. Next.
Like many in Thailand, girl at Klong Lad May Yom floating market in Bangkok this February wore a dust mask to prevent coronavirus. Likely unaware this type of mask provided limited protection to her per WHO.
Yeah, I think that you've got a nice portrait of the person here. I think that the fact that she's looking way off stage makes it that it's not a connection with the photographer or with the audience, but with her world. I think that works. It's in and of itself, it's not super strong story, but when you bring the title in, and if you could bring the title back, please. It really makes it a strong story, particularly when you're pointing out that a lot of people are wearing these face masks thinking that they will protect them from the coronavirus. These type of masks are used to protect other people from you if you might be sick, and you covered that fact here in the title that this isn't actually the proper use of the mask, so it makes a good and very timely story. Next.
Okay, we're going to monochrome now, starting with B, 7 images.
Desolate, Sosus Vle, Namibia.
Yeah, here the photographer has decided to process the image or expose the image in such a way that it ends up focusing on the graphic nature of the story as opposed to making a very realistic image, I believe. There is certainly, you can recognize that these are trees and this is probably some sand or salt desert, but that's not really I think the main point. The main point is the desolation, and I think you really see the desolation by the way they process this image. Some people might say, why do we have all this area over here? But I think that in this case you want that because you're trying to show desolation. So having a lot of negative space works very strongly along with the shadows. I also want to point out, if you look very closely, there's a lot of halo around all of these images. That of the branches, that's usually something we strive hard to avoid. It can be caused by chromatic aberration, it can be caused by over-sharpening, it can be caused by not being super precise if you're doing masking. But in this case, it doesn't bother me. It sort of gives the branches kind of a Twilight Zone type of feel, which I think contributes to the message of desolation. So I don't worry about it here. In fact, it may add, I think it adds to it. Okay, next.
Board ready, suit ready, I'm ready.
So a really nice, putting the background out of focus. This area is kind of mysterious. I don't know what it is. Is it trees? Is it water? I don't know. But I like the mystery. I think it goes very well. Here we see clearly the water and where she is going to shortly do some surfing. I very much like the way you've captured her face with her eyes, not even looking where she's going, but maybe looking out into the ocean in a sort of contemplative manner, maybe thinking about where she's going. You have kind of an interesting leading line coming in here to her. The face is a little bit soft, it's a little bit maybe not as sharp a focus as many portraits we like portraits to be, but in this case, to me it gives like a little bit of a classic view of some of the older photography. It gives it kind of a little bit of a romantic feel. So I think that that's working. You've also used the kind of the general rule that you want people to move into the empty space, and I think that that's working well in this case. You don't always have to do that, but in this case, if you went and cropped it like that, it would have a totally different feel. It'd be like energy and danger and excitement, which doesn't go with their expression. But with this way, it adds to the sort of contemplative, romantic nature of the image. Thank you. Next.
Edinburgh street scene.
Yeah, nice example of street photography. You've captured very classical Edinburgh buildings, and of course you have the bagpipers leading a march, which definitely sets the place. This could work in travel as well as monochrome. A couple things that I think it's very important you show kind of the castle in the background, which really puts you in Edinburgh. It's kind of disappointing that this area is so bright. You might just put some, tone it down and add a little bit of gray, maybe with some noise, so it's just not quite so bright. Might help you keep your focus down here. You also might consider, depending on exactly what your objectives are, is to crop to there. So you get a little bit of the out of focus area here and that out of the way, unless you feel like this is like the modern Edinburgh and this is the ancient Edinburgh. But I think that you might just consider a little bit of cropping there. There's still plenty, you can do it with still leaving plenty of space underneath their feet. I think you also got a nice shutter speed here because there's just a little bit of motion blur on the 1 foot that's up in the air, while the other one is nice and sharp, which gives a little bit of more sense of motion than if you used a real short shutter speed and froze that in place. Okay, next.
Lucky Gardener's Legacy.
Good angle on this where you get the front of the plane and the side of the plane as opposed to a head-on shot or a pure side shot. I think that works nicely. I'm not sure what you're trying to say with the rain and the splashes, but I think it adds a lot of interest to the picture, so I think that that's good. You have to, I think you need to decide whether you need all of that sky above the plane or whether you could, don't get too extreme here. Maybe like that or something. Because there's not a lot of interest in the sky and there's quite a bit of noise there. So, if you cut just a little bit off, it would take the horizon out of the center and bring a little bit more focus on the plane. Thank you.
Morning after.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and I feel like you're channeling some of the classic photographers, like Imogen Cunningham maybe. And I'm really enjoying the tonal quality of this image. I think that the fact that the area around the shades has gone to pure white with no detail is correct for this image because it gives the sense of it's very bright outside and it's kind of illuminating the room inside. I'm liking that very, very much, and I like the depth of focus through here. The thing that bothers me probably the most about this image is this piece of cloth or some dress or whatever, I'm not sure, because it's so out of focus. I don't know if we're using it to block the head of the person that's in the bed so we don't recognize the person. But everything else is so sharp and beautiful and smooth tones. This doesn't seem to really fit into me. Over here, it's fine like it is. You could also consider maybe a little bit of cropping there. I don't know. I mean, this bag is kind of interesting. The only problem with this is you're showing so little of it. And those little white areas there maybe are a little bit distracting, which you could also clone out if you wanted. But you might think about that in any event. You might decide you like it best the way it is, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, thanks.
Parrot tulip.
So there's more detail.
Okay, we're starting out with Pictorial, the B level, 6 images.
2017 solar eclipse, Ochuco National Forest above Prineville, Oregon.
Yeah, I think this is a very creative presentation of the solar eclipse. I mean, it's a difficult thing to show in a pictorial setting. I mean, you see telescopic views of the sun, but it doesn't give you the whole feeling of the place. So having like essentially a time-lapse photograph where you captured the sun and it's through its various stages as it goes through total, and getting all the corona around it at total eclipse is really beautiful. The foreground, I think, is nicely handled. It gives you the feeling of sort of a twilight feel. You might even consider exaggerating it a little bit by maybe adding a little bit of blue to the image maybe. But I think even just like it is, it certainly gives you the impression of that kind of mysterious thing as we go into the partial eclipse and then finally the total eclipse. Okay, thank you.
Golden Gate Scenic View.
Yeah, I like the idea of the bridge disappearing into the bank of clouds. I'm not sure exactly, what happened here, but there's what's called posterization, where you have very distinct levels of color or gray rather than continuous tones. This often happens if you have an image that's like really, really dark or really, really light, and you kind of use curves to stretch it out to get the full tone. So something like that is happening here. I doubt it was intentional on your part, so that's something to think about. One way to handle this is maybe apply a Gaussian blur to this. That might get rid of it. The other thing is you have a pretty strong halo around some of the features here. And again, I've talked about that before. It can be due to over-sharpening, it can be due to masking, it can be due to chromatic aberration. If it's due to sharpening, there's a technique called asymmetric sharpening, where what sharpening usually does is add more dark on the dark side and more light on the light side. And asymmetric sharpening, you just add the dark to the dark side, you don't add the light to the light side, and it gets rid of halos like that. Or you can zoom in and in Photoshop try to retouch it. I know a guy who worked for Richard Mizrack, who does those great pictures of like the border wall and things. His job was to retouch Mizrack's pictures, and he spent hours there. This is analog photography, not digital photography, going in and retouching all of his negatives to eliminate all the little defects that you get. And one of the big things was chromatic aberration at sharp edges, to go in and erase that. Okay, next.
Richard, your mic on?
Oh, sorry.
Honk, honk, honk.
Yeah, this is not, yeah, okay. So we usually like threes for some reason. You notice that? You have life lived in the pursuit of happiness, of the people, for the people, by the people, and life, liberty, and the American way. So for some reason we like threes. And we like it visually as well as in written text and speech. And this very well captures that. Particularly, you've done it where this goose is looking in, this one's looking in, and then you have the one in the center looking directly at the camera. So I think that works very effective. If you really want to get into like some fine tuning here and like you like masking in Photoshop, you might try just darkening the sky a little bit to make these white guys stand out even better compared to the background. Okay, next please.
Sunrise, Lake Rafine.
Very dramatic sunrise, nice reflection. One of the choices you always have to make when you have pictures like this is how much of the sky do I want to show versus how much of the reflection I want to show. It's generally speaking not a good idea to put the horizon right in the middle and show equal amounts. You want to emphasize one or the other. And in this case, I think the photographer has done a nice job. They put the shoreline here. They have this dark in the middle. There's still like detail here. This like fog coming off or steam coming off of the water, which is kind of causing a blur here. That's fine. Most of the focus on the wonderful sunrise, yet we have a nice reflection down here that kind of complements it. Okay, next.
There's light at the end of the tunnel.
The lighting is what's beautiful about this. And so this nice warm colors on the trees as they arch over. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think you should consider whether you would like it better if you cropped out the top sky, because it's a little bit bright. It might bring in focus a little bit more on the trees. It's questionable. It's something to play around with. The other thing is I'm not sure the title is optimum, because when I look at this picture, it's not about the light at the end of the tunnel. It's about the light in the tunnel, which is so gorgeous. So. You might want to use a title that maybe brings people's attention to that. Okay, thanks.
Under a despairing sky.
Yeah, what we have here below is such a scene of decrepitude and decay. And so the sky is now despairing of what it sees below. That's very, I think, a very interesting thing. You might think about actually boosting the contrast in the sky, making it a little bit darker to make it a little bit more foreboding. I mean, it's pretty foreboding as it is now. Maybe you can boost that up a little bit. And maybe even increase the contrast down here a little bit too. Although I like, instead of having a cool black, you have a little bit of a warm black. I think that contributes to the sense of aging. Okay, thanks. Next.
Okay, on to A, 9 images.
Before the dance.
A nice pose with the young woman here in her dress, looking down, maybe a little bit shy for some big event that's coming up. You've got the background nicely out of focus. You could consider darkening it a little bit, especially here. It might be some kind of tricky work to do that, but to generate a little bit more separation between the dress and the background. Yeah, okay, thanks.
K9 Porter.
Yeah, so funny. This is great. It's a hilarious picture. It's capturing something you saw on the motion, having this big expanse of the salmon-colored wall, and then the black and white dog poking through. I think is perfect and positioned perfectly. I want you to consider making just a slight change, and that is to just crop that line out, this line here, because it makes this whole texture, oddly enough, even bigger if you get rid of that break, even though you're cropping a little bit out of the picture. And I think that one of the things that makes this picture so dramatic is the black and white dog against this very nice, almost uniform with just texture wall, and that kind of breaks it. Okay, thanks. Next.
Horseshoe Bend Sunset, Arizona.
Super dramatic. Chosen to make this a very saturated picture, presumably for effect, particularly in the water and the reflections there. Nice rays here. Was it, I guess, the question is, was it your intention to make the sky so green? I mean, we have a green flash when the sun goes down, but that's the only thing that strikes me as just a little bit odd about this picture. And I don't, maybe it was your intention to create drama by having kind of a greenish sky instead of a bluish sky, but it's something to consider. Okay, thanks.
Morning Shine.
Good. The title really brings your attention to what I think is one of the key features of this image, which is the edges of the stems have caught the light and scattered them to the viewer. So have these bright outlines. So you have these very strong vertical lines, and then the what normally would maybe considered a sharp thistle is now turned into something kind of soft and gentle. I think that is a very nice interpretation of the scene, and good use of selective focus to put the background out of focus. You know the field is continuing, but you're really focused on these plants and the unusual way that they're lit. Okay, next.
Mumrise.
Yeah, so it's like a sunrise coming out, radiating out. You've got the center of the plant kind of in the PowerPoint of the picture, and allows you to create these strong diagonals coming out like that. Just a little bit of color here, which is kind of interesting, and then almost ghostly white everywhere else is a different, nice interpretation, I think, of this flower. Okay, thanks.
One with nature.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me maybe of Maxwell Parrish or something with the highly saturated colors, strong contrast, the very dramatic patterned light is, I think, very interesting. And then the photographer there maybe taking a picture of this tree. So out there all isolated by himself, just part of the natural scene. I think it's kind of dramatic and a little bit different than a typical scene of this type. The one thing that kind of captured my attention a little bit is, I don't know whether the tree has lichen on it or what, but the branches are all highlighted with this little purple glow, which works, I think, is really interesting. The only place that may be a problem is where the branch crosses the main trunk, because it sort of gets disassociated with the branch, and you just see this blue purple squiggly line on the trunk. You might consider getting rid of that. I'm not sure, but it was the one thing that kind of caught my attention, is just a little bit. I mean, in a sense, the whole picture is weird in a beautiful way, but this was kind of like a little bit too weird. Okay, next.
Peekaboo.
Nice lighting. You've captured these young girls looking out the window with beautiful warm lighting on them. I like that very much. You might say, hey, why is this so bright over here? It brings attention away from the girls over here. I don't think that's a problem in this picture. In this picture, that just adds to the warmth of the whole image and the beauty of it. Again, I see a little bit of posturization on that girl's face where the tones aren't perfectly smooth. Why, I don't know, but you might look into that. don't think this is the best title either, because when I look at these girls, I feel like they're more contemplative, they're more curious. It doesn't look like they're, surprising anybody, so it doesn't really feel like peekaboo to me. You don't want to distract from the beauty of your photograph. Okay, thanks. Next.
Table for three.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because this, in a certain sense, this is someone else's artwork because the chairs are someone else's design, the weird contour lines on the floor are someone else's design. But you've gone and chosen a particular angle that I think is making it your own. And it almost doesn't even appear to be chairs, but just a totally abstract design of patterns. And I think that's really enjoyable. And I think it's enjoyable that it's mostly high key, so there's not a lot of really dark areas except for the band around the table and the lines on the floor. Otherwise, it's all kind of cool and light, and I think that makes a very interesting photograph. Okay, next.
Valentine's Day flowers.
However you've done this, the flowers look like they're glowing from inside. Even the leaves look like they're glowing from inside, which I think is a really, really nice effect. And I'm enjoying that a lot. It's hard to tell. I think these are mostly in the center of the screen, but that's okay because it's a bouquet. You've got sort of this triangle or diamond-shaped pattern here, which is a nice compositional element. A little bit of way out of focus, greens in the background. I kind of wish this particular green one was either darker or not there, but otherwise it's a really kind of stunning picture. Okay, thank you.
Pictorial AA.
Aging well.
Yeah, I got to maybe from the title assume this is not, maybe it's part of a water system, which is why it's called well, or maybe it's old but it's still working and that's why it's aging well. I don't know, but the title and the image I think works pretty well together to make you think about what's going on here. I think you've probably chosen to maybe up the saturation a bit, but it makes it a much more graphic element with a little bit of higher contrast maybe than a straight capture would be. But there's lots of moving parts here and lots of kind of weird coloration that's gone on that makes it almost an abstract picture. You could even go and zoom into some small areas here and make it a totally abstract picture, and yet another picture that's even more abstract. Okay, next.
Color wheel.
Yeah, nice, beautiful, soft image, playing with light, playing with shadows, playing with motion. All of that is happening in this picture. We have one thing here which has some more concrete nature to it, yet it's transparent, so it's a little bit ephemeral, and then it blends into the very ephemeral spinning spokes that are going around with all the different colors. Good placement of it, off-center, giving it a little bit more energy, I think, to the picture than if you had put this right in the center with equal spokes all the way around. An alternative would have been down in the corner, but I think that it works well where it is. Okay, thank you.
Despair.
Yeah, we need to kind of interpret this as an abstract photograph where we have all sorts of strange patterns here. Maybe we're the type of person that sees faces in images and thinks that this is portrait of someone who's in despair, or maybe we think this is just an emotional subconscious reflection like a Rorschach test. But it has some little blue elements in here and gray, all kind of interesting things to look at. Okay, thanks.
From mist to frost on a withered flower.
I was telling someone earlier, don't stop photographing things just because they're dead. You can see some it's like the transition of life as it goes through its various stages. Death is just another part. And sometimes some beauty emerges in that phase. And I think this really shows it with the kind of pattern and colors that are in the dried out desiccated flower. You've chosen a nice arc to the main thing, put it just a little bit off center, but in left to right, but kind of centered vertically, and that's okay because you balance it with a stem, and the fact that's out of focus is actually nice, and then balanced it with some a negative space above. And then the interesting thing about the frost that has crystallized on the edges of the flower. Even on the screen, though, I think that you're lacking some detail in the snow, so I think you want to either check your exposure. This part's perfectly exposed, but or maybe use some processing to maybe bring out a little bit more detail, less of it. You can have some blown out areas, but not quite as much. And that will also, I think, help separate it from the background, which you have some nice bluish colors in the background, which are helping to contrast against the orange of the flower. Okay, thanks.
Sunrise in Petaluma.
Yeah, there's a number of features I think that is nice about this. First of all, the perspective of this trapezoid here is bringing lines almost perfectly over to the sunrise that's just poking through the industrial setting over there. Or maybe grain elevators, or I don't know, maybe associated with agriculture, or could be associated with gravel, or a lot of things that could be. But you have this old-fashioned, and this River Heritage Center, so it tells you that, but kind of the old-fashioned and pastoral images over here, and then contrasting with the more industrial setting over here, and yet all turned into some romantic setting by having the rising sun and the flowers in the foreground, giving you a strong foreground, and they're perfectly in focus too. So the depth of field is working quite well here. Oh, sorry. Okay, thanks.
The Palouse in August, Hangman Creek.
Yeah, haven't seen too many pictures of the Palouse in August, so it's nice to see all the gold colors here. And that contrasts nicely with the blue of the stream that's making a nice line that for sure goes here, and then you can kind of sense that it goes off like that. And of course these are colors that are on opposite sides of the color wheel, so they generate a lot of contrast, which is really nice. Not sure these trees are, I don't know what's, it's interesting because this seems perfectly in focus, but that tree doesn't. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just an artifact of the screen or something. Okay, thanks. Beautiful sky too. You're looking out there.
Okay, masters, 7 images.
Boy in Red, Kenya, 2020.
Yeah, of course, red is a nice color that automatically attracts your eye, but you've also got nice lighting on his face, which brings out his features. He's obviously more interested in what's going on over here than he is in the photographer, which I think has a nice feeling. The background is just enough out of focus that it keeps the attention on the person. And you see probably a goat or something in the background, which gives you a sense of his life and where he lives. I don't know. You might consider, I'm not sure this would work, but you might consider a little bit of vignetting, particularly maybe over in this area. I'm a little bit worried, I think, because I think this, I like the sort of sharp edge to edge, so I'm not sure vignetting would work, but I kind of feel like I want to de-emphasize this a little bit. Okay, thanks.
Fuzzy fiddlehead.
Nice detail. You got the sweeping motion and the beautiful curve of the fiddlehead. Nature, by its rules, produces these nice geometries of different spirals that are so, seem for some mysterious reason also be attractive to us aesthetically, and you've captured that in this image. The bokeh of the sunlight coming through the background, I think, is working quite well in this picture. Okay, thanks.
Sea lion resting along the Oregon coast.
Yeah, this is interesting because the title plays a valuable part about this. It took me a little bit before I saw the sea lion, but that's okay. There's so much power in that wave. I mean, look at that thing. What's going on here? I don't really know, because it looks like it's going this direction, but this is the land over here. So is it crashing and then falling back? And then, the colors, it's so green, that has a certain sense about what the water is doing. And you give me the title and it says, oh, there's more than just that power there. There's at the kind of the base of this triangle, there's the sea lion. So it gives you kind of a powerful sense of the environment. Okay, next.
Soy Cowboy, Bangkok, home of ladyboys and go-go dancers.
Yeah, so these stiletto heels, right, are the key here, and the person has chosen to just show, from mid-thigh down, all these legs and stiletto heels. So I think it really gives, and then because of the environment and the lighting of the environment, you have these blue and red, and that's reflected on the people. So I think it gives you quite a sense of this location and the activity that takes place there. Okay, next.
Spring Magnolia, Striping Botanical Garden, San Francisco, California.
Yeah, interesting choice of cropping. You've got this strong, powerful diagonal coming in here, which then opens up into the leaf, or into the flower bud, and you've pushed it way over to the edge. You've just left kind of the minimum amount of space there. If it was any closer, it'd be, I think, a big mistake. But it's enough. And then all this negative space over here. And, it makes me think, well, what is trying to be conveyed by this image? It makes me want to think about it. So here's a case, you broke a lot of rules. It makes kind of interesting. The only comment I would make is, and maybe you don't want that, maybe this is part of the ambiguity of this image, but the edges are really, really sharp, and then as you go to the center, it gets fuzzy. And I'm just wondering what it would like if it was sharp all the way through. And now I'm thinking, no, I think maybe you made a right choice. This area here is just color, and only the detail is around the edge, so the sharp edges are kind of holding that color in. Kind of an interesting idea. Okay, next.
The warm spring sun warms cold water and the newly emerged flowers.
Yeah, it's nice to get the steam coming off the water, You've got the low light with this warmth coming in and creating not only these shadows, but illuminating the light perfectly, giving backlight to the leaves here and highlights to the leaves here and the flowers. I think that's really cool. You've got just enough detail in here to feel like there's something going on. Maybe you don't know exactly what, but you kind of feel like it's more of the garden. So I think that's working quite well. I'm not sure that this bright part of the water is that consistent with the rest of the image. And I'm just wondering if you want to maybe trim a little bit off the bottom, just so you just get a little bit of the reflection and not so much of this area over here. Some things to play around with. Okay, thanks.
Up.
So here's a case where you want to allow the perspective to cause the buildings to narrow down as they come in. I think that works really well in this case. And you have the negative space here, which is also very interesting because it's not just a circle of light. It's kind of this L-shaped or kind of a V-shape too. And then you have this wire that goes across. That's so interesting. It's like tying the two things. And then a little bit of a flag sticking in. That's also adds interest to this picture. It makes it a little bit different than the ordinary view straight up of the skyline. Do we want maybe a little bit more of the flag? Maybe. Maybe not. Oh, you gotta remember to take that copyright off. Okay, next.
Okay, we're starting on travel now. B, 2 images.
Okay, travel is another one of our storytelling categories. So we want to give a sense of place. Maybe make it so, there's one way to do it is to make it like a place you cause the viewer to want to visit, or maybe you want to tell a story about that place to give a sense of that place. I think this works very well. A nice contrast between this poster that's reminding us of the end of the Cold War, and then contrasting that with the people just going about their ordinary business with their smartphones and everything. And it says a lot about Berlin. There's a lot of great stories, photo opportunities in Berlin with the wall and the remnants of the wall and the white brick on the ground where the wall used to be. Lots of good stories, and I think this is one of them. Okay, thanks.
Solitaire, Namibia.
Yeah, beautiful a placement of this, just the shell of the car with the bright yellow and red, which it mimics the color of the desert itself. And then, do you really trust if I go in this direction that I'm going to find all of those things? Or am I going to find another building sort of like this car? Gives a real sense of place, I think. Okay, thanks.
Okay, travel A, 5 images.
A crisp fall morning view from the historic Many Glacier Hotel, Glacier National Park, Montana.
Very scenic location, of course. And you've got a nice view of the mountains and the glacial lake and the reflections of the mountain in the lake. It certainly makes me, I look at this and it makes, well, let me also point out, you've got some people there that are observing the scene, which I think is a good thing in a kind of a landscape picture, if you want to put it in the travel category. Because now I can imagine myself as I'm that person there looking into this scene. So I think that makes it very effective. Okay, next.
Granite Chief Trail, the Tahoe Rim Trail, TRT, circles Lake Tahoe covering 175 miles. Some hike it in sections while others attempt a through hike. This stretch is in Granite Chief Wilderness.
So the title tells me a lot about this place, which is good, because I wouldn't know that much about it without a detailed title. I certainly can see the path, I can see what the environment is here. What would have been, I think, nice, since we're talking about people hiking, is if there was actually a person there. Even they could be heading towards you or away from you. I don't think that makes that much of a difference. But then I'd really get the feeling of, yes, this is a trail and people hike on it the way you explained in the title. Okay, next.
Just another Puerto Vallarta sunset.
Just another. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so if you want to communicate that we live in a great place and we're used to having beauty around us all the time, maybe you want to come here too and see this beauty. I think that you do it with this photograph and this title. And here, as I mentioned before, you not only have the beautiful sunrise, but you have the person in the boat, which again, I can imagine I'm that person. So that helps tell a story for travel. Okay, thanks.
Polychrome Mountains over Fall Birch, Glen Highway, National Scenic Byway, Chugach Range, Alaska.
Yeah, that you can certainly see how these mountains got their name. Look at all these colors. It's just amazing. And the fact that the colors in the rock are reflected in the colors of some of the foliage, it makes it even that much more interesting. I think you made a good choice with the panorama here, because you have this mountain range going across. You don't need a lot of sky, just a little bit. You don't need too much of a foreground. You want to focus in on this area. And if it were, I mean, you could have made a picture that was just that mountain, but I think the sweep is very nice. Okay, thanks.
Window shopping, Venice, Italy.
Yeah, I think that it does feel Italian to me. I don't, particularly the naked mannequin in the window. And I love the reflection of the people in the window, which really tells the story of window shopping. I mean, they might have been just kind of looking vaguely in that general direction, but with the reflections there, and get her face right on his ass. I mean, really. I haven't been to Venice. I've been to Milan, and so I kind of appreciate this. Okay, thanks.
Okay, on to AA, 5 images.
A lone hiker descends through the labyrinth of canyons on the Golden Canyon Trail, Death Valley National Park, California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this definitely gives you a sense of place. I think it's really good because when people hear the word Death Valley, if they're not familiar with it, they might think of mule team borax and flat salt or whatever, but there's a lot more to Death Valley than that, and certainly the sculptured landscape and the multi-colored different layers, and then you put a person in there. And so again, it puts a sense of scale, it gives the viewer a place to imagine themselves being there, and they're wearing red, so that really jumps out at you. Okay, thanks.
Double rainbow over Grand Canyon, Point Imperial.
I get back here. Yeah, I love that. I mean, you've got of course, the rainbows are beautiful subjects, but rainbows by themselves, well, we kind of see a lot of pictures of them, even though double rainbows are a little bit more rare. But because it's a clearing storm creating the rainbow, you've got all this beautiful lighting, like that one peak and a little bit of light over there. And then you've got plenty of detail in the Grand Canyon here. So I really feel like I'm in this place, I want to go to this place. Do we need all of that sky? What if we cut it down to there? something to think about. Okay, thank you.
Most transport is human-powered in Old Delhi, a bustling shopping district where the streets are too narrow and too crowded to allow cars and trucks.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, so here's a guy looking directly at the camera, kind of suspicious looking, like he's suspicious of you. But he kind of sets a anchor for a view that then goes into the distance, where we pick up the three-wheel bicycle, human powered, someone hauling a car. Look at all the stuff on that. That person is pulling all that. And of course, this guy has this very big thing on his back. So it definitely gives you a sense of the place. The weird thing about India is you could be on a 4-lane superhighway and see the same scene. Okay, next.
The Grand Tetons and the Snake River at sunrise.
Yeah, you got a little bit of the river coming in here. You can kind of imagine that it goes on into the distance. Nice cloud across and the glowing sort of alpine glow, except this is sunrise. I don't know if it's still called alpine glow then, but kind of the same phenomena. And kind of the triangle of trees dusted with snow. I think all works together to give a sense of place. Okay, thanks.
The Guindice funicular climbs the steep hill behind the Ribeira neighborhood in Porto, Portugal.
I like the fact that even though the subject of this is the funicular, that you put it off to the side. We certainly see that, but then all these beautiful, buildings with all their colors and kind of flat, painted look to them. It's just a dramatic. I really want to see this in person. I love funiculars. I kind of would like to see maybe a little bit more of this road down here. It feels a little bit cut off to me, and I think that it forms a nice base on which these hillside houses are built. But other than that, I think it really tells a nice travel story. Okay, next.
Okay, Travel Masters, 4 images.
Fog envelops San Francisco, California.
Beautiful image. It certainly tells a big story about what San Francisco is like. Panorama format, I think, is really good. Just the building sticking out from it, I think, works very well. I'm not sure this would convince anyone to visit San Francisco. But if you want to tell a story about San Francisco, it does. And I'm wondering, what if you focused, instead of being panorama, what if you focused on just this part? And the reason I say that is because I almost feel like there's 2 pictures here. Because here you see down to the ground, you see construction cranes and stuff. But here, on this side, the buildings are more in silhouette. They're not tidally silhouette, which is nice. But you just see the very tops of the buildings. So it really looks like these buildings are floating in the clouds or just coming out of the clouds. And then here it becomes a little bit more realistic. So maybe it's another photograph, maybe it's a different picture, but something that focuses on this area here. Okay, thanks.
Foggy morning on the Holy Ganges River in Varanasi, India.
Mhm. Well, I think this does give a very good sense of the shore of the Ganges River, where lots of buildings come right down to the river. They're often used for funeral pyres. and other religious ceremonies. And you have the nice clear view of the boat. I think that, you know, you've captured the right part of the boat, cutting off the one paddle is perfectly fine. And then you have this nice fog, which I can imagine it being like that. But it's thin enough that I can see the structure of the buildings and some people doing their daily chores or whatever in the background. I think that works quite nice. Okay, thanks.
Sian Kong Zone, an old ethnic Chinese community of Talat Noi in Bangkok, is off the beaten path to tourists, with its old references and chop and sell car parts along back alleys, circa 1970s Fiat 500.
Yeah, I think this tells certainly a story about part of Bangkok where, as you say, it's off the beaten path, so tourists don't usually see it. I think this picture would work wonderfully in pictorial as well as travel, because I think it has a lot of great pictorial elements with the straw hat on the wall, the wires going everywhere, bricks covered partially with stucco, tires in the window, all sorts of colors all over the place, maybe quite saturated colors, whether that's natural or something you've decided to boost up the saturation a little bit. It doesn't matter. I think it makes a dramatic photograph. Okay, thanks.
The Wave Limestone Formation is located in Coyote Buttes of northern Arizona. It is the largest photographic candy store that I have ever visited.
Yes. So you might see this in a photography magazine advertising someone's expedition. Join me, see the candy store. Yeah, they're so dramatic. These are, I believe, actually fossilized sand dunes, which is kind of amazing. So obviously you've got some pictures, photographs you've included some photographers in the center. If you're a photographer, for sure you'd now think, oh, I want to be there, one of those guys taking this picture, because it's so dramatic with all these swirls and stuff going on. Okay, thanks.
Okay, this is non-competitive, so that means someone submitted images just for feedback, but did not want to compete.
Okay.
Along Quai de Bourbon, Paris.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting image. I like the fact that you are kind of showing, the Paris that has evolved through the ages with its cobblestone streets and these dramatic street lights and buildings here, and then contrasted it with this motorcycle. And you don't need to see the whole motorcycle. By capturing just a part of it, you get kind of this diagonal here that contrasts with that diagonal there, which I think is working quite nicely. Now we get into the little nitty-gritty things. There's something that you could have done at the time, and that is wait about 30 seconds for those two people to walk out from behind the rear view mirror, side view mirror of the motorcycle. And then you'd have two Parisians in the picture as well, which I think would have been kind of cool. As it is now, I'm not sure cutting them in half with the mirror is great, but you could go in and maybe just clone them out. These are just like little tiny details that you can think about when you put these things, when you put your pictures together. You also might think about, I love the way the lights are lighting up that branch. I wonder if we should artificially lighten this area here, just a tad bit, so we see the kind of the same effect. You can see it's already lighter in this area here than the other areas. Maybe just emphasize that a tiny bit. tiny bit. Okay, thanks.
Dog walker 1.
Yeah, this is, this,
You wanna do it as the whole sequence, or you wanna do them one by one?
I want to do them, oh, I don't know, are they intended to be a sequence,
Yeah,
or are
they're
they,
intended to be a sequence.
or are they just for 3 individual pictures?
I think they're 3 dog walker pictures.
There are 3 dog walker pictures, but are they just 3 dog walker pictures?
I don't
Or are they a sequence
I
of dog?
don't know.
Because it'll make a big difference about how I talk about it.
Well, let's just run through
Let's
it
see it as a
quickly and then,
What? Okay.
yeah, that's the same dog walker.
Yeah,
This will call it sequence.
I interpreted it as just the person was taking 3 different pictures of the dog walker, and was
Okay.
like, which one's best, and that kind of. Because I don't know. I don't see a huge story here, so I wouldn't really put them as a sequence. But as 3 individual photographs, we can talk about them. I think, if I look at this, it's a nice communicating about, the work these dog walkers do and their interaction with the dogs and the dog's individual personalities, because, this guy, he's really focused on that photographer. Who is this person taking my picture? And then the person here is looking down at the other one saying, hey, people get in line here. I'm a little bit concerned about what you're doing. Maybe you're getting distracted. And I probably, that's the story you're going to want to tell. And I think you probably want context. This person is, kind of in a suburban setting, kind of natural area. But I think that you can maintain that context and still bring a lot of focus on the person. So, I think, you could consider taking about that much off of the bush. You could consider taking that much off of the sky. And, it's up to you about how much of these cars you want. But you could, even if you go in this far, there's still like the car in the background. In this type of shot, the fact that the foreground is out of focus is not that important. But, again, in the idea of focusing on the highlights, you could crop some of that out of focus area out and really end up with a photograph that's like this. And I think that would bring your attention onto the main subjects, particularly those 2. It would still be enough of the background to maintain the context, but still have that added focus. That's kind of my opinion. Okay, next. Okay, so this is a more straight environmental portrait. So everyone is nicely posed, except for maybe that guy. But I think that's amazing that they got all the dogs, they're posed perfectly, looking at the camera, smile, and the woman is very happy about all this. But I'd have the same context. It's an environmental portrait, so you want to keep her in the environment, but I think that you probably don't need the light structure there, so you could probably crop like that, and maybe down here, and maybe like that, and maybe like that. And you'll still maintain enough context that you know that where this dog walker works, but you'll get the focus on the main subjects. Particularly since I think this is like screams portrait. Okay, next. Now we're back more to the live, but again, if you wanted to make a sequence, once again, he or she is looking directly at the photographer, very suspicious, want to make sure you don't make a wrong move. And everybody else is sort of going along. Maybe this person, so, and now she's not so much concerned, she's looking at the person. Obviously going downhill, first I worried about that, but you kind of established what the horizon is with that part. So now although I would love to crop it down, I'm not sure that works. This might work. And you don't necessarily need the tree in there either, but. That's what I would, what I would play around with is maybe a little bit sharpness on her face. See how close you can crop without losing the feel. I mean, eventually you're gonna crop it so much that it kind of looks, you lose the kind of a lot of the emotional and context out of it. So we don't want to go too far, but that's what I play around with. Okay.
Okay, that's it. Okay. Are we ready, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, Pictorial B. Honorable mention, Previan.
Who's here? Okay.
He's here.
All right.
Just, I don't know if you noticed it, it's the same goose. But he was posing, like he would look at me and do something, and look at me again and do something else, and kept me entertained for a couple minutes. So all the poses that he was doing, so I picked the best three, and I put him in the same one.
You fooled us. Okay, third place. It's Joel, yay, he's not here.
Good job, Joel.
Previan, you got it again, second place.
I rushed for this one because I got out of work, and so I really wanted to catch the sunset.
Beautiful.
And like, I know that sometimes if I'm not in time, if I get there before, I'll start looking for something else to take pictures of, and then I'll miss the moment when this happens. So it was like the exact right moment when I got there. I got the camera out, and I was dialing all the settings before I got there, more or less checking that everything would be right, and that's it.
Where is it?
That's Point Reyes, Cypress Street Tunnel.
Oh,
Really
Nice.
very nice.
An old radio station.
Okay, and first place, Fritz, I don't think Fritz is here.
No.
Not here.
Yay, Fritz.
Yeah, good job.
It's just nice.
Okay, honorable mention, Alan, Alan's not here.
Yay, Ellen.
Yay, Alan. Guy Miller,
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
honorable mention. I don't think Guy is here either.
Yeah, we got it.
Steve, you're here, third place, yay.
Yeah, it's funny, this is the one I didn't get a chance to finish. The day I posted the picture, I had to leave for a workshop, and I did that upper right green section was bothering me, and I finally figured out how to fix that. I did a couple more little things to it. But thanks, it's fun.
Yeah, good job. Beautiful picture.
Really great for not being done.
Yeah.
Wish we had the story on this one.
Oh, yeah.
That's so
We're gonna make people write in their stories and send them in.
Right.
Yeah.
Linda.
Linda.
That looks like a Linda picture, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. She's not here either. No, Michael's not here either.
That looks like a Michael.
Yeah, looks like
That's
Michael's
a
picture.
microphone.
nicely done.
Oh, Jennifer, good job. Second place.
Now, this is in Yosemite, there's a not a hot spring, a warm spring, a pond, and so the mist coming off of it was freezing on these dried up flowers, and I just loved it.
Very
Wow,
nice.
really nice. Oh, color wheel, Tricia.
Have to find out the story on that one. too.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Looks like a monochrome.
Looks like a bottle.
Okay, Pictorial Masters. Pictures. Tony's not here.
Hey, Tony.
Yay, Tony. Third place, Terry's not here. Oh, God, I already hear about that green one. She's one that always is
Looks like
great and
Japanese
creative,
print.
so there's usually something going on. Tamara. She's still in Africa. Nancy, we could have guessed that was gonna be Nancy.
She's not here.
Nope, she's not here. Elizabeth, great job.
The Berlin Wall just is so iconic for me in growing up. And so seeing that it was gone and then seeing that they've made art from it just blew me away. So,
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
I'm sorry, Tara. I don't think Pat's here.
No, she's
Yay,
not.
Pat.
Good job. That's great. I just,
Yeah.
Where's the tires?
okay, third place, Richard.
Oh, thank you, that's, it's really fantastic. I think the colors are even more vivid than that when you drive by, but, that was probably it was a good time of year to get the colors. Most of the year it's probably under snow, but fantastic ride up a beautiful valley.
Just gorgeous, just gorgeous. Huh?
Is there metadata?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good job.
Second place, Linda. Glacier is her spot.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
Galen?
First place is Guy.
She can really see herself in his butt.
Yeah.
They probably didn't even see themselves.
Smooth as a baby's bottom.
Too bad she wasn't taller though.
Okay, travel AA,
Yes.
honorable
Yeah.
mention, Dan Murray's not here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, Dan.
Herb.
Herb.
Hey, Herb.
Yeah. You knew it was built for
Yeah.
Portugal.
He gets around.
No, that's Bill.
Oh, wow.
All right, Bill, wow.
This is from your just returned from
Yeah,
trip?
just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It was even crowded, more crowded and busier than it looks here. Just amazing that, and what you don't see in what you don't see in an image is the noise
Yeah.
and smells, and it's just an amazing place.
That guy is giving you a hard eye.
He is, yeah. My wife and I were in one of those rickshaws, just like, you see, they're heading the other direction. And we were kind of cutting in front of him.
No.
We're about to.
Nice. Okay, travel masters. Liz, third place.
I've tried different versions of this and I can't quite get it. Thanks. It was a neat day.
Nancy.
That's pretty fun. Just
And Tamara. Okay, monochrome now. Desolate Pat.
Pat.
Yay, Pat. Caribbean again.
Nice.
Good job.
Good job.
You know that person?
No, I was actually, when I took that picture, I was trying to get the Milky Way. I
made her a star.
I started driving 4 a.m. and looking for a good spot away from light pollution, and that's actually also Point Reyes, but it was a different time, and so I got to a point where all the light started to come out, like sunlight started to come out, so it was blue. The sky was blue, it was not black anymore. So I just stopped trying to take the pictures. And when I realized where I was, because I was just driving and not really looking like where I was, I pulled out my phone and I saw that I was like less than a quarter mile away from the beach. And well, then as I said, I started looking for something to shoot, and
Yeah.
Good job.
Really good.
Oh, Elizabeth, great shot.
Thank you. His whole makeup is black and white except for his ear. And so I was so inspired just to turn it to black and white and get his ear to be white. This is the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, and they're just fascinating to photograph because the colors are so wild. Thank you.
Ronnie and her flowers.
No, it's
Yeah.
better. It's better now.
Yeah, isn't it better now that we've adjusted the?
Yeah,
Yeah.
See, they're,
Rick,
See,
Yeah.
Richard.
Thank you.
honorable mention.
I love the curves you see in the sand and whatnot. And that was just interesting because there was that little bunch of fluffy little feathers that they were just protected right there, and that was the natural place for them all to accumulate. So,
Good seed.
thank you.
Looks like they're ready to take flight.
Yes,
Steve,
Steve, that's cool.
that is really neat.
The second time I've had a version of this image in competition. And I always really liked it. I put this thing out on Facebook, and I have more likes on it than anything else I've ever put out.
Wow.
All the years I've had on Facebook, which is kind of amazing. But that church, standing right about where I'm at, within a few feet of that, Ansel Adams did a shot from there before there were any of the trees or houses or road. It was just a dirt road and the church. And it's a stunning,
Wow.
stark photograph. So that's kind of it was a takeoff of his with a little more modern flair to it. I added some topaz to try and get some texture on top of being infrared. Well, I spent quite a bit of time on it. The funny thing is, we talked about taking I thought there was too much dark on the far right where the driveway is. And I had that way dark, but it made the whole black. It just seemed like it was completely out of balance with too much black there. So now I may have to go back and add a little bit more on the right. So I think that was a good tip. I'll go in between when I had too dark. Now if it's maybe a little bit too light, just add a little bit more to the top. So anyway, thanks for that.
Did you add those rain?
Yes.
They were.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Sherry Oscar, second place.
Great shot.
Hey, Sherry.
Hey, Sherry, yeah. See, now you can see the
You can see the
trees
trees.
behind
There you go.
the trees.
You can't see the forest from
Oh. Dad joke.
Good guy.
very nice.
Yeah. Okay, AA, honorable mention, Tricia.
Yay, Trisha.
What is
Yay.
She does a lot of flipping.
And Michael gets third place.
Yeah.
That's great.
Her with the Silver Falls, he's good with waterfalls, I think. Hey, first place, good job.
I love that shot.
So he just about went over. He was, you can see he's got the wheel cranked and he's gunning at his all four wheels have separate drives. And he just managed to pull himself back out of it.
That's amazing.
Wow.
I love that.
And you're so close, it looks like.
It was pretty close, actually. He was, because at that point he was getting ready to make a hard right, so had a good vantage point.
You hope he was making a hard right, right?
Hard right, yes.
Okay, Masters. Tim,
Yay,
he's
Tim.
not here, but his copyright is.
The secret is out.
Yay.
Hello, Terry.
Who's that church?
It's Steve Gibbs' church, it's just the wind blew.
Yeah.
It's from the Wizard of Oz and landed there.
Yeah.
That's astounding. Love the light. Oh,
Tony.
God.
This is,
Okay.
Yay,
Very good.
Tony.
He was telling me about this.
I'm so glad we have a sense of humor.
F11. Yeah.
Oh, tomorrow. Now you can see his other side of his face.
Yeah.
Much better.
Wow.
Now, it's push the button on the projector and changes
If
everything.
you push the right one.
Yeah.
Nice.
I like it a lot.
Journalism B. Third place, Elizabeth.
This was my first helicopter ride, and it was just amazing to
Oh,
watch
boy.
the flow of the lava. You know, definitely once in a lifetime, and it was cutting out and making the island bigger.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, the iPhone, yeah.
Yeah, taking pictures of.
In the helicopter, I'll take a look at it.
Cool shot.
Oh, me.
Cheryl.
Yay! I wasn't even sitting here when he judged it, so I didn't know. Yeah, I forgot, I will put the date, the year that was taken on there, but, and I agree with you about cropping out. I actually cropped quite a bit of her out of the picture, because she was, you know, domineering, but I definitely agree with your changes, thank you. Oh, Joel, yay!
So is this,
Oh, Dick. Nice.
Oh, that's nice.
where did
Yeah,
that come from?
It's worth a price even if he had competitors, you know?
Oh, it is. I don't remember seeing it.
I missed it.
I don't know if I may have missed showing it, and I don't know how he did it, but
Then he
it
still
might
got
have been a
first.
twitchy finger.
No, I read the title.
You read the title?
Yeah.
He read the title, but I didn't show the picture?
You
No,
showed
you
it.
showed the picture. I
Oh,
saw
okay.
it.
I don't see it either.
Well,
Sometimes say it.
Oh, well, good job, Dick.
Dick.
Maybe that's the one that Roy climbed.
Okay, her.
We split into a
First
parallel
place.
universe.
That was it.
Yay.
With a power shot.
Huh.
Well, that was her also.
Yeah.
It's a sequence.
Oh, I-
Yeah, it's a
That's not
sequence,
bad.
yeah.
Mine was short.
Power shot? Was it power?
Yeah, with a power shot, it just. Who was it that we had here who said, they said what's the best camera to use? And she said, it doesn't matter, I know you don't want me to say that, but it doesn't matter.
The best camera is the one you have with you.
Exactly. Okay, masters. Nancy. Anna. Yay.
Yeah, this
Good
is
job.
the tattoos and blues event that we, the field trip,
Great
and,
job.
so thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys gotta go next year when it comes up, because it was, the people were so nice and friendly, you wouldn't believe it.
I live right next to the Flamingo Hotel, and every year I tell myself I'm gonna go, and I always wind up being out of town.
Did you get a tattoo, Cheryl?
I did get a tattoo, but I got a temporary one, and I wore it for a week and had interesting people talk to me. Cause it was one of those really, you know, like eagle with talons out, and, you know. Okay, Terry, yes. Okay, are we ready?
Ready.
Tell me louder.
Ready.
Okay, here we go.
Can't remember.
Oh.